Sunday we celebrated All Saints' Day. The day itself is always set for November the 1st, but it is such an important feast day in the life of the church that we are allowed to celebrate it on the Sunday closest to November the 1st. I always like in various groups to ask the question, who has been a saint for you in your life? Who has been a saint for you in your life? One of the persons I always think of when I ponder that question myself is my mentor, tutor, whatever, the Reverend Harry Tisdale, longtime rector of Holy Trinity in Decatur. He was a rare combination of scholar, pastor, counselor, just a fantastic man. He sent 9 of us to seminary over the years, and one of us even made bishop. I'm not sure that's... Never mind that. At the age of 32, Harry was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. He was told there was no cure, there was very little treatment, that over a period of years his spinal column would calcify and it would pull him forward so that he would be in a bent-over situation. He scoured the country until he found someone who would make him a brace that would keep his back straight as it calcified. He would never sleep in a bed again. He chewed aspirin like gumdrops. He always looked forward to Saturday mornings because in his Decatur neighborhood it was common practice for the Jehovah's Witnesses and others to cruise through the neighborhood knocking on doors and preaching the gospel as they understood. Harry loved it. He couldn't wait for the doorbell to ring. And he would invite them in, and his dear wife began in the kitchen cussing the day he was born. I'm sure that picture helped influence me as I read the gospel for this morning. Jesus is in Jerusalem. He has visited the temple, and he has been accosted by the Sadducees, one of the very conservative religious sects. The Sadducees looked only to the first 5 books of the Hebrew Scriptures as being authentic Word of God. In that view of those 5 books, in the view of the law, it was obvious that they did not think much of women. Eve and her sinfulness was portrayed. But they know about Jesus. They've heard him. It's no secret. He speaks about the afterlife of God's will for people. And so they come to him to test him. And they draw that very interesting portrayal of a woman who is widowed. You see, in this day and age, women had rights. In that day and age, they did not. They had no rights whatsoever. They were totally dependent on males, on their husbands or their male children. And so they paint that absurd picture of a woman who is widowed, not once, not twice, but 7 times. And they ask Jesus, In this heaven you preach about whose wife will she be? And Jesus' response is, first and foremost, there is no marriage in heaven. I'm waiting for the applause.
Not your life.
Whose wife will she be? Obviously, it's a trick question. They want to catch Jesus in some way so they can denounce him. And Jesus responds about, first of all, there is no marriage in heaven. Marriage, heaven, the afterlife, is about something entirely different. Something entirely different. It's not a continuation of life as we know it in this phase, in this world. First and foremost, in the afterlife, there is no such thing as death. Think of that. No such thing as death. I suspect that the Sadducees left Jesus much as those folks who rang doorbells in Herod's neighborhood left his house, making sure that they noted the address and never to come back again. Unfortunately, the Sadducees are still with us. Sadducees are still with us. They are the folks who want to make God in our image, to have the same biases that we have, to interpret the heavenly realm as their own creation. The Sadducees had very little use for women. And there are still pockets of that even in this day and age. Women served only to wait on their husbands. The concept of a loving and forgiving God was inconceivable to them. In short, the Sadducees wanted to create God in their image. Have you ever noticed that you and I can tell someone, go to hell? How often do you hear someone say, go to heaven? Haven't heard it lately. You see, it seems to me that every now and then you and I need to be reminded that we are not in charge of the world. Oh yes, we contribute. We have things to offer and things to see that they are avoided. But we live in a finite world, and death is a reality. My first concern should be, how do I live my life in this world, in this now, in this finite realm? I'm aware of all the limitations of time and place and circumstances. There are good days and there are bad days. There are ups and there are downs. There is tragedy. And occasionally there is great joy. That's the world we live in. And Jesus says, this world is your world. But you are given this world to enjoy. Not to fear, but to enjoy. Think of that. He really doesn't say much about life after death, other than the fact there is no need for marriage. Life after death, as he describes it, not only to them but to us, is best characterized by the phrase being with. Being with. Being with one who loves you. Being with one you love. Being with one who believes you to be of great value. That's the afterlife that he describes for those folks. And what it has to do with us is that we're called to enjoy the life that we are given, and that awaits us is great joy. That heaven is not about marriage or anything else other than being with the one who has created us, being with the one who calls us into relationship not only with himself but with each other, being with the one whose greatest joy is that we experience that joy ourselves. We are to remember that when we die and when those whom we love die, that God does not die. It is a passage. God's love for us, a love that has already been thoroughly communicated to us, is that we not die. What he says to those inquiring minds, to those who want to create the afterlife as they would like it to be. He says very little in detail. What he says is, you will be with. You will be with the one who created you. You will be with the one who sustains you. You will be with the one who forgives you. That's the afterlife. Being with, not with spouses or the things that we surround ourselves with in this world. Just simply being with the one who cares, the one who loves, and the one who forgives. That ought to be the source of great joy. It ought to be the source not only of joy but of comfort. There are those bad days, those down times. But knowing that you are loved beyond your wildest dreams, that even the worst of you and of your life is forgivable, it seems to me that's the courage, or it breeds courage, to live life to the fullest. And let God worry about the next one. Amen.